Hello, I'd like to talk today about the concept of a learning society, uh, studying our emotions and knowing them better, as proposed Dr. Brian Lynch in his book from Interest book in Chicago, Knowing Our Emotions. Um, so I'm going to explain and try to demonstrate while in the learning process, emotions are very important. They can be an obstacle to the learning process, or they can be very helpful in the learning process. And I'll try to demonstrate also how we can work on with our emotions. In order to help uh, the learning process to happen with interest and joy. So, during my PhD studies in the science of education field at first, then in the education, culture, and society field, and later on during the postdoc in the philosophy field, but always matching philosophy and education in all those fields. I search for mutual evolution and care. And my topic was the evaluation of our unintentional attitudes during a relationship that can has the purpose of finding the meaning of life through the understanding and the respect of our highest human values as freedom, dignity, brotherhood, equal rights. In fact, those highest values of the Occidental culture should give the meaning to our lives and to our laws. I worked as a university professor during 14 years in Brazil, but also as a yoga teacher, also as teacher of the kindergarten. Also as during many years a Guarani friend. It means Guarani is the Brazilian Indians. So I had the privilege to transit in between formal and informal education. Informal education is the education that happens uh, in zones that are not supposed to be learning zones, systematic learning zones, but where learning can happen also. And it's very interesting. There is a lot of places that are not supposed to be learning places, but where we learn a lot of things. I'm thinking about the Facebook, I'm thinking about the social media, I'm thinking about a hospital, for instance. I'm thinking about a dinner among friends. Informal education is this places where we're not supposed to learn, and where we are there by curiosity or by we are obliged to be there as a hospital, for instance. Um, but we end up learning a lot of things. And so it's important to open our research field when we speak about learning to the whole society, because in fact life is a learning matter. We are always learning every day, everywhere. If we deepen the subject, We can learn at the supermarket, we can learn at the coffee shop, we can learn everywhere all the time. So that's why I speak about a learning society. There is no end to our ability of learning. We think, well, I go to school to learn, then I go home and I stop to learn. It's wrong. We keep on learning all the time, and sometimes with joy, sometimes with interest, sometimes in very suffering manners. That was my topic. So during a long-term observation, I noticed that those unintentional attitudes, they express the subjectivity of each one of us during a learning process, and they are intimately connected with our emotions. These unintentional attitudes, those attitudes, they show up immediately followed by a judgment, as noticed Paul Ricoeur, an evaluation of desirability or undesirability. It's in a very short term and interval. We can say, I like it or I dislike it. I like this teacher, I don't like this teacher. I like this person, I don't like this person. I like this dress, I don't like this dress. It's very, very fast with objects, subjects. It's very unintentional. It's rational though. It's conscious. There are explanations to this. Even if we have to study the unconscious story of the reason why we dislike at that point that color, that person, that scientific discipline. So the unintentional attitudes, how they appear? Well, Sigmund Freud, described those attitudes as resistance to the learning process. They can be denial, escape, fugue, aggressive attitudes towards the other or towards oneself. He was not the only one to study the unintentional attitudes. Levinas also, Emmanuel Levinas, a philosopher, he studied the attitudes that emerge while we face someone stronger than us, who can intimidate us or break us in a certain manner because he's emotional stronger or intellectually stronger, or both physically and emotional stronger in a certain learning situation, because he knows what we are supposed to learn and what we don't know, and what we have to do not knowing in order to learn and to know. As myself speaking English, for instance. So I have to speak English, not always knowing very well and very properly as I would like to speak English. In order to learn to speak English, there is no other way. So talking about learning society, I decided to learn with you and to explain my topic in English. So I'm very sorry if I make mistakes, but it's the only way to go through the learning processes, to take some risks. Later on reading the works of Brian Lynch, Donald Nathanson, that study Sylvan Tompkins' works, I had the privilege to access the emotional field and to understand that we had 9 main emotions: interest, joy, surprise, anger, fear, distress, disgust, contempt, and shame. And I was very attracted by the emotion of interest. and joy, because these positive emotions, they are the guidelines of learning process when it occurs happily, uh, and they are very powerful emotional tools, interest that we could relate to curiosity and joy. If someone is happy to teach what he has to teach and interested in what he has to say and what he has to transmit, usually this interest is contagious, and the joy also is contagious. Emotions are contagious. And on the contrary, if we are bored to be seated in the teacher chair, imagine the students how they will be bored. And so when they reveal our interest, they awake our curiosity, the unintentional attitudes, they can inspire new discoveries in the scientific field, in the art field, I better say in the transdisciplinary field, because interest and joy are powerful drives in all the learning fields. They can motivate the dialogue that lead us to innovate, but also transmit um, uh, different types of knowledge, including traditional knowledge, because um, this this interest and this curiosity and this joy will awake the interest or the curiosity of the other. And anyway, we need peaceful conditions to interest and joy being possible emotions in the learning field. If we are frightened, if we are under pressure, and if we are obliged to do things, if we are not motivated, very often we'll be frightened, we'll be scared to make mistakes, and will not be happy to be there. And so we need peaceful conditions in the learning field, conditions where psychological and physical violence are forbidden. And we must be very vigilant to have a neutral zone, a non-resistant zone, a peaceful zone that allows development. What Vygotsky called a proximal zone of development. And Roland Barthes, in his classes at the Collège de France, he told a lot about neutrality as a key for understanding. He has long lessons about neutrality, and he says, I am deeply and passionately neutral. So, to explain that it was so important not to take in advance a point of view or another, but to listen, to pay attention to all point of views, and to have a space, a peaceful space of deep listening that allows learning to happen. So I would like to go deeper. There are in the unintentional attitudes I studied two main obstacles. The over-evaluation of desire and the devaluation of desire. Because at the bottom of an intention attitude, there is desire, the desire of learning. But this desire can be over-evaluated in spite of our biological needs. And on the contrary, we can devaluate the desire of learning and be interested only in fulfilling our physical biological needs. So I was very inspired by Jacques Lacan écrit works where he says desire is the difference between our needs and our wishes. I'm going to say it in French. Le désir est l'écart entre le besoin et la demande. That I translate, desire is the difference between our needs and our wishes. The needs, they relate to our basic biological needs. And the wishes, they are related to our language and to our imagination. So in desire, we have all this complexity. When we feel a lack, it can be a biological need, hungry, thirsty, sexual drive, or it can be a wish of learning, of understanding. For instance, all my biological needs can be fulfilled. I can be perfectly satisfied, not hungry, not thirsty, having a wonderful husband. And in spite of this, I'm still not satisfied because I want to learn more. I want to understand better things around me, myself, the others. I'm not fulfilled with all that I have because I lack meaning sometimes, and that what is my search is a search of meaning. So I can go through studies that last 60 hours per week, sacrifice myself in the work process or in the creation process and so on. Everybody knows this type of situation of overwork, of being overwhelmed, because we are called by some inner duty feeling of serving the others and understanding better and ourselves and the others through this service or through this creative process. It's kind of call, vocation, and that is what I say. It's the wishes, la demande, for Jacques Lacan. And in that case, the learning process can transform into a sacrifice process, an overwork process, where we forget our needs, our basic needs, to eat, to drink, to rest, to make love. So we're not interested in those things anymore. We drink anytime, we eat when we can, and we forget that we have to make love many times. So in certain case, in the saint case, we don't even allow ourselves this thing of life, normal thing of life. So on the contrary, I study the devaluation of desire, and when our needs take all the place. So it's not important to learn new things. It's not important to have a meaning of life. The important thing is what we're gonna eat this winter. And learning become an option. And the important is to survive. And nowadays, we are much more in this condition in our societies where we need to struggle for survival and to acquire all that is basic for our needs, how to dress ourselves, how to feed ourselves, how to drink water, proper water, how to have a roof under our heads, and to learn is quite a luxury in certain places because we are in the struggle for survival. So when basic biological needs are not fulfilled, there is no way to be a learning society in good conditions. And people learn with hungry, with pain, with sacrificing, with cold. We learn, we're still learning, but that's not good conditions, and that's not a way of working things out. So in my thesis, I talked a lot about the importance to fulfill our needs, but also the risk of thinking that the only thing we need is to fulfill our biological needs and to forget our deep wishes. And one big wish is the meaning of life. And so we have to pay attention in balance our needs and our wishes, le besoin et la demande dans le désir. So the both sides that are important in our complex human desire, because our human desire is both made of needs that need to be fulfilled and wishes that need to be satisfied as wishes of meaning. And the only way to fulfill the wish of meaning, of understanding one another, is learning. Learning, reading books, creating, entering a creative process, an art process, as a scientific process. And so I come to the third part of my thesis, the human mutation through desire. So thank you for your patience, and let's go. Desire can be transferred to the object of knowledge. What is the transitional object, according to Winnicott, the object of dialogue? And this object can help us to solve several conflicts by the message the object carries. And it can help us to change a point of view and understand better ourselves, the others, and the society we live in. So an example of object is a good book, but not only. It can be, well, for instance, a good book that was very important to me was Saint Leon of Goldwyn. This was a hell of a discovery, and it was published by Autrante Editions, a story about a quest of meaning of life. Godwin was really a discovery. A good book, so it can be a piece of music. I remember when I listened the first time to Tannhäuser opening of Wagner opera. It's it was amazing. I just had finished to write a book, and I listened to this piece of opera, and it was like the joy of the fulfillment of having found a little bit more meaning and beauty in my life. Because I could speak about beauty when, as said Immanuel Kant, when it's true, it's beautiful, and when it's beautiful, it's true. So it can be a book, it can be a music, it can be a song, an old song, but that remind us precious times. It can be a pic, a photography. It can be a painting. It can be a draw. So while those objects, they these cultural objects that we create, they circulate among us. They help us to be a learning society. And they can go through the social media, they can be in a house. There can be books and paintings in a house, and so the kid is going to look at the books and look at the paintings, and it can be a piece of wonderful music playing, and the kid is going to listen to this piece of music without effort and learn about beauty, about harmony, about joy while listening to this music. So it is important to know that our desire is the deeper source of our learning process. That this desire can be devalued or over-evaluated. That the learning process can turn out to be a sacrifice or can be rejected because our needs are not fulfilled in the process. And we have to. So we cannot learn and spend time learning because we need to fulfill our basic needs. But we can also know that when we have peaceful and neutral places to express our desire, this desire can manifest interest and joy of learning new things. And it's so beautiful when someone understands better himself, herself, someone else, or our society through the learning process. Well, I stop there. I could talk for much more time, but I don't want people to get bored. So thank you so much for your attention, and see you very soon in the next